Good evening, good evening, good evening. I hope you hear me out there. Hey, welcome to Thursday. This is the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge Q&A session. Um, we are actually close to being on time today, which is crazy because I had a lot going on today, but we are here. Um, so we're here today to talk about some things and concerning Black history. Um, if you are new to this session, we're here every Thursday. The Erudition Network is dedicated towards teaching and informing you about Black history predominantly, but also we do this interactive to provide a general knowledge session also for those who are seeking knowledge, which is what we're dedicated to doing with this network. My name is Eddie K. Phillips. As you can see from the ticker down at the bottom, I am the founder of the Erudition Network, and we have been on for just about under a year right now doing this particular program. So I see currently right now, we don't have too many people that I see online. So we're going to give a couple of seconds for people to try to join as I allow them to do that. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We have his birthday holiday is fastly approaching next week. And so we're going to delve into some of his philosophy today that he dedicated his life to before his life was taken, before he was assassinated. And we're going to go into some of those steps that Dr. King dedicated himself to. You know, it says something for a person to. There are only two individuals that we give a holiday for on record in the United States. Dr. King being one, and Columbus being the other. Columbus, nefarious history there, and many things that many places in the country now celebrate Indigenous People Day as opposed to celebrating Columbus because of the horrendous things that were done by Columbus and his many, many voyages over here. People think that Columbus only came once, but he came many times. But when you consider that Dr. King and Columbus both have a day. Now, there used to be, when I was a kid, you had Washington's birthday, Lincoln's birthday, and then they kind of combined that and made that President's Day. So currently, right now, Dr. King, the holiday is celebrated for his birthday solely for him, right? And so that's historic even in itself. And there's so much that went into getting that holiday established. Some of us are young enough or old enough to know that it wasn't a quick flip of the switch, and that happened. There were many steps that were taken. There were many people who had been adversaries of Dr. King during his life who did not want the King, his birthday, to be celebrated as a national holiday. But for us today, since we have two people on, hey, give us a call out. Let us know you're here. Let us know that you're on as we go through today's interactive episode. But getting back to Dr. King, Dr. King should be celebrated. One of the things that is so important about his life is the idea of having a life of service, a life that not only that you put yourself on the line, but that you also made sure that those who came after you were well represented, and you left a legacy. And so when we talk about, you may see my eyes, I have a screen above me right here. When you think about Dr. King, I want you to think about that. I want you to consider what it means to have a life of service and to leave a legacy for people to be able to learn and to garner and gain things from your life. So We have two people on here. I'm not gonna wait any longer. We're gonna go on. People will join later, or they can watch the rebroadcast. During Dr. King's life, um, there was the idea of nonviolent resistance. If you look at the civil rights movement, you will see that on many occasions. Hey, good to see you, Sister Virginia. Thank you for joining us and for tonight. Appreciate it. Hello, Jackie. Hey, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Dr. King dedicated his life towards nonviolence. He believed that nonviolent resistance was the only way for us to be able to attain the rights that we have. Or I shouldn't say that. I hate that. Not attain. It was the only way for us to showcase the violation of the rights that we were given as citizens of the United States. Constitutionally, we were given those rights at the freeing of our ancestors. As we became direct citizens and no longer chattel property, we were supposed to be allowed to have these rights. But unfortunately, what wound up happening is that people, and racism that was in people allowed them to take away these things from us, and to, by state law, make it so that we could not enjoy the freedoms that we should have been given and we should have enjoyed. So when we look at the life of Dr. King, it was the idea of making sure that we could have these rights, right? So that we have a citizenship to be here within this country. 14th Amendment allowed us to be able to be citizens as we were the children or with the ancestors of former slaves. Now, having said that, we have to also understand that there were steps that had to be taken in order to do that. He saw nonviolence as the way to do that. Now, that did not mean that he did not come under confrontation. Malcolm X, different other civil rights leaders, even the Marcus Garvey's earlier movement, a lot of people were not necessarily about the idea of nonviolence, right? A lot of civil rights advocates, the civil rights people were like, hey, no, I'm not going to go out here and get my head beat in, right? In order for us to get the rights, as Malcolm said, that we should have been given as men and women anyway, right? So the idea of being against nonviolence was not because they understood the desire, I should say the spiritual desire to turn the other cheek, but they also saw it as something to say, wait a minute, what does this mean? What does that mean that I'm supposed to allow these people to kill me, to hurt me, to render me, right? And so Dr. King had a struggle throughout his life in order to try to bring people to understand the purpose and the power of nonviolence. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted us to kind of go over that. And I wanted us to be able to try to talk about the idea of nonviolence as a function, and ask that critical question: does it still work? Do you think that the idea of nonviolence is effective today? Do you think that it's seen its time, and that we now live in a time that nonviolence no longer works? And if you feel that way, I want you to try it, even whether you do it in chat, to defend that answer, or to support that answer, I should say, based on what you believe, And so I'm gonna while I set up this other screen, I'm gonna ask you: do you think today, and what we've seen in the world, that nonviolence is still effective? As what you've seen, even if you don't know all the aspects and the steps and the things the principles of nonviolence, from what you've seen throughout your life, do you believe that historically, as we see nonviolence, is it effective today? I'll leave that question for the 6 people that I got on right now. Do you think that it's an effective thing in our protest of today? And I'll give a moment for somebody to answer that. A moment here. Sorry, I tried to have this screen set up a little bit earlier, but it was not acting right. So I wanted to, let's do this. Let's just take this. Okay, nobody has any thoughts. I will tell you that I think that nonviolence still works. Okay, Jackie. Nonviolence is not effective in this day, but could be effective. I think it's based on a person's moral education. That is a good. That's a great comment. I do believe that it does come down to your moral education. I think that's a great way to phrase that. How are you brought up? How do you see confrontation? Do you think that it's something that you have to meet confrontation with confrontation, or do you think that there could be some reconciliation? And if you are a person that has been taught that reconciliation is not possible, then I could see how nonviolence of nonviolent philosophy wouldn't work for you. I could understand it when Malcolm's mentality on it, because you see it as, hey, that's not going to work because people are only going to take advantage of it. So that's a great point. I witnessed the effects of nonviolent protests after the George Floyd. Yes, we saw effective nonviolent protests. The police were brought to trial and convicted for his murder. I believe that a lot of times people see nonviolence, the nonviolent philosophy of Dr. King, as something that is weak. And I would ask anybody if you've been taught or people have said that to you. I used to get mad at this shirt that people used to wear all the time, where they would say, "I'm not my ancestors." And I always took that shirt as a statement of saying that our ancestors were weak. I think reconciliation is possible. It's how an individual responds. It's true. It's true. If you believe that people cannot get along, cannot do things to help themselves, excuse me, just still having back issues, but then yeah, you're gonna respond in a very negative, almost very hateful sort of way, and we have to be careful of that, right? We have to be careful of that. I'm gonna say this to myself. So one of the first steps. So Dr. King, if you go on to the King Center, Dr. King gave out many steps, 6, for what should be done in order to have a nonviolent philosophy. That's what I was trying to bring over, but it's giving me some problems. So I'm just going to speak to it. One of the first things that he talks about is gathering information. Very often in today's society, I don't know if we do things properly in gathering information. We are in an information boom society. And what I mean by that is that we are very quick to say, hey, I know something, based off of, some half-cocked, many times not really analyzed ideal. What is dangerous about that, what is often very dangerous about that situation, is that when we don't um, base our information on something vital, right, or something that is real, then we can be pulled into this whole propaganda um, kind of situation. And so when you get down to the idea of information gathering, I am always quick to tell people that you need to understand, right? Let me send this to myself. Sorry, everybody. You need to understand that that information needs to be vetted. One of the first things that I do anytime I do any type of research, or I go look for anything, is I vet what it is that I'm looking at. I say, wait a minute, based on just because such said something, um, doesn't mean I'm going to do that. Daniel, I may get into a little bit of that, but I think that that's a whole nother aspect of Dr. King. And I do believe that financial security and things like that is important. But I also think that we need to look at the nonviolent issues right now. And why I'm saying that is because even today, what we're seeing is that people are still being attacked, hurt, victimized. And I think that, though the idea of that Dr. King had, and he espoused those things very, very articulately. And we will talk about that. I'm going to bring that up this coming Saturday. We have a show, and we're going to talk about all of those things that Dr. King talked about with where do we go from here. But tonight on Erudition, what I really want to focus on is the idea of nonviolence. And we're going to stay on that because I think that it gets a bad rap. I don't think that people are really understanding what it means. What it means. So we'll get into that this Saturday, but right now I want to talk about this nonviolence. So anyway, getting back to what I was saying, information gathering. So we're talking about what he wanted us to understand is that you got to gather your information, right? You got to understand what the problem is. You got to investigate. You got to see if it's real. Got to understand, is this something that's really happening? That is so important because what people who don't do that will quickly tell you that the issue that you're talking about doesn't exist, right? It's not real. And so the thing that I want you to understand is that your information gathering, you must become an expert on your opponent's position. I remember a couple of years ago, I was talking to my nephew and I was telling him with debate that one of the things you got to do is you got to be able to argue both sides. Whether you believe it or not, what are the benefits of both sides and what are the negatives of both sides? And so when you do information gathering, you have to accept those things that are not comfortable for you, that may not make you feel good about yourself, right? We see a lot of that when it comes to people getting mad about any type of Black history being taught. They base those ideas on the wrong thing. They tell themselves that I don't want my child to be taught anything about Black history because I think that it makes my child feel bad about themselves. And so they tell themselves this lie. And too many of us, right, don't have the amount of information that we need to be able to say, hey, what you're saying isn't right. It's wrong, right? And so we go along with it with the idea of, okay, I'm not going to gather enough information or have enough of an argument in order for me to be able to defend what it is that I'm talking about. It is so important that you go into those things that you do not like, those things that may not. We say it on here on Erudition. Some of these things aren't comfortable. Some of these things don't make you feel good about yourself. But it is so important to not lie to yourself, to tell you to actually provide the information that or get the information that you need, and to provide it with validity, right? With truth. Because if you don't do that, then what you're doing is you are creating a lie to yourself. And too many of us do that. And we shouldn't do that. The next step. Some things you have to confront to be free. Yes, say that. Some things you have to confront to be free. You can't lie to yourself because it makes you feel good about yourself. Guys, I'm sorry that I'm struggling right here. I'm trying to get this thing, but it's not doing what it's supposed to do. But the other step, Dr. King, let's move further. The next step is education. Now, I'm an advocate for education, where you need to inform people, right? Once you have done all of your fact gathering, right? Once you know what you're going to argue, what you're going to state, then you need to go in, right? And you have to make sure you understand it at the minute level as well as you possibly can. That may mean going and reading more and doing more. That may mean going in there and challenging your own understanding of a particular thing. I will tell you that a lot of times with me, I will go and read something, but then I'll go pick up other authors' books. I'll go pick up from different political perspectives, religious perspectives. I'll go read that because I want to make sure that when I'm learning something, when I'm trying to figure something out, I want to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. I don't want to be out there making up anything. And I try not to do that in my life. If I don't know it, then you probably won't hear about it until I figure out that I know it. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on it. And I think that is so important. And a lot of people don't get that. We speak on things without the proper education, and then we teach it to people when in fact we could have learned it. And then the other thing is sharing it. Education is not necessarily just me telling you. I have to be able to share it with you so that you know where to go get the knowledge from. It makes no sense if I'm giving you cups of water, but the well is in my backyard. And I can say, hey, man, the well's right here. Go hydrate yourself. Go learn further for yourself. And so that second step is so important. It is also important. And I think that it is often lost on a lot of people that information gathering and that education piece go hand in hand. They operate with each other. And so when you think about nonviolence, I want you to think about Dr. King's life, because that's what this is about. Right? During the Montgomery bus boycott, right? So I heard someone posted the other day, they were like, well, Rosa Parks really didn't do anything. She didn't do anything. They just put Rosa on the bus because she was the more acceptable person, right? She was the one who was a member of the NAACP and people would accept, right? And so everybody just kind of blew Rosa off. My people perish for lack of knowledge. Yes, our people perish for lack of knowledge because they don't understand. And a lot of them is even the key to that, don't want to understand. Because there is bliss in ignorance. There is bliss in ignorance. The idea that I don't know something gives me the excuse to continue whatever I'm doing and to allow myself the excuse to continue down any kind of wayward path. Those things are crazy, but they're true. But in the end of the day, we have to understand that gathering, getting back to what I was getting ready to say about the Montgomery bus boycott. When Rosa got on that bus, yes, Rosa was told to go on the bus again, and she understood what her purpose was. But this was also based on fact gathering. because they knew that folks had been been told over and over again, and they needed to make a stand. And they needed to make a stand with somebody that the community could get behind. And they needed to do it so that they could find a purpose to bring all these people together. Rosa was known in these churches, in these places. She was known. So this, when people act as if this was a conspiracy, it goes along with what Dr. King is saying, right? Gather your facts, gather your information, and then you educate. Because that's what they did next. They got people together. They told people, let's get to these churches. Let's talk about what we're going to do, because we know what they've done. Let's create a plan, right? Let's create a plan. Let's know where we're going. So those first two major parts of the nonviolent philosophy are very, very, very important, because you can't do anything until you have information, and you can't educate anybody unless you know what the heck you're talking about. And they did both. They did both. The next part of that, moving on, after you've educated, after you've gotten your information, after you educate yourself, the next part is a personal commitment. Dr. King said you have to be personally committed. You have to know, right, that who you are. You have to check and make sure that you're committed to what you're doing. And if you can do that, then you know what you will have an idea what your goal should be. So that personal commitment, you're going to eliminate. He said, eliminate hidden motives and prepare yourself to accept whatever comes. That may mean suffering. That may mean harm. That may mean losing a job. That may mean somebody saying, how dare you, insulting you, whatever comes. Because justice, you have to understand, have a personal commitment that justice, Regina said it earlier with the George Floyd, that it's worth it. That what I'm doing is worth it. Because if I understand that, I'll go the full mile. I'll push beyond my doubt. I may take a stone to the head, but I got a goal. I know where I'm going. I've educated myself. I know where this should go. I know what my rights are. I know what they can and they cannot do. I know when they do something that they cannot do, that I have them. I have trapped them into this mentality where they felt they could get away with something. And now it's on display. Now everybody sees it. You cannot get to personal commitment. You cannot without those other two steps of informing yourself and then educating others so that you all share that common goal and that philosophy and that understanding. All of those steps work together. They work together. They have to, in order for them to be effective. The next step is negotiation. And this comes from the idea of trying to understand that even though I have my goal, even though I have the things that I'm doing, right? Everybody may not necessarily like my goal. Everybody, right, may not get along with what I'm saying. So negotiation happens on both sides of it. It happens on both sides. If you're joining us tonight, because I know we just got new people that just joined on, we're talking about the 6 steps, principles of nonviolent action. Because see, we often talk about Dr. King, but what we don't do is talk about who was he. We can celebrate his life and the things that were accomplished in his life. But tonight, I wanted to take the time to talk about who he was, what he did, right? And I wanted us to do that because I think it's so important. Because too often, we just tell ourselves certain things about people. I'm going to share my screen since we were finally able to get this on here. And so that's what we're talking about tonight, if you're joining us a little bit later. And we had gotten to negotiation. To negotiation. And if you look here, it says using grace, humor, intelligence, whatever, right? You're going to confront, right? And you're going to talk about what your injustices are and what you expect and what the resolution that you expect to have. But there's a key here. He says, look for what is positive in every action. Because if you come at a person completely negative and saying, you did this, 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 you're going to lose some people who could have been allies. One of the things that I see, and I asked this question earlier, do you think nonviolence still works today? Is that when I watch protests now, I see people get in front of the police officer. You don't know that officer. And you scream in his face and you say, you dog, you pig, you whatever, you whatever. But you'll notice here that he said, you seek to humiliate the opponent. You know, hearts and minds, we're taught in the military that we're here, when we go overseas and we're fighting, we go to war, we're trying to win hearts and minds. If I go in as a warmonger, meaning a warmonger, then the people in the middle don't know who to trust, don't know who to back up, don't know who to support. And so when you look at negotiation, it's not a weakness. You're simply trying to have a conversation, if you can, with a person before it becomes an all-out war and battle. Dr. King would come to a city and they would tell these people, this is what we expect. This is what we demand, because this is what the Constitution says that we are owed. He would tell them, you are the mayor, the governor, whoever. You are in power. How do we make this happen? How do we make sure that the laws, right? So when they came with something like, well, we don't want vagrancy in downtown, so that's why we don't like blacks here. Then he would say, well, the blacks are the ones that spend more money in your town. You negotiate. You meet them with logic. This was very important. But you don't have that logic if you have not, as I said earlier, gather that information. You have not educated the people around you, and you're not committed to doing it. When you get down and sitting at that table of negotiation, everybody in there should have the same mentality and be on the same accord to understand what we're going to do. Just said that's what happened when the world watched on video the cop with the knee on George Floyd's neck and saw the look on the cop's face. They awakened to the world not only the treatment of blacks there, but the attitude of those in authority that blacks had been talking about. Yes, everybody got to be on the same mentality, same place, and understand, in order for you to be able to negotiate, it's a must. The next step, after we all hear, if nobody hears you, the next step is direct action. See, we too often, what I see right now with those who say that nonviolence doesn't work is we jump to direct action. We want to cause attention. Sometimes that is required. A lot of times it is not. When people are unwilling to meet you, that's the key there. When they are unwilling to negotiate, to discuss, to not see logic. You have to have attention. Good trouble, right? Maybe that means you get arrested. Maybe that means you break an immoral law. But you put that pressure on your opponent. But see, the thing is, you've already put the opponent, this is all chess. You've already put the opponent in a position that is untenable and uncomfortable for them. You've already put them there. You've informed yourself, so you come there with knowledge. I remember watching a video of C.T. Vivian standing in front of the police, and he was spitting knowledge, laws to a police officer because he had educated himself. The followers that were with him, the people that had his back, they had educated themselves. They were all committed. And when that cop punched C.T. Vivian, Reverend Vivian, in the face and knocked him down a couple of stairs, Reverend Vivian did not even hesitate. He said, "If you put your hands on me, we're not here to fight with you. We're here to demand the rights that we deserve." This was what Dr. King taught all those men, right? The Fred Shuttlesworth, the C.T. Vivians. That's what they understood. That's what this philosophy was about. When we celebrate Dr. King's life, we're celebrating the idea of outthinking that racist opponent. They knew the cameras were on. They knew the world was watching. So when they got to a point, you will notice that direct action is all the way towards the middle. Right? 4 other steps happen before that ever happens. And that's on purpose. Because I'm not trying to fight with you in a physical confrontation. I don't want to do that. I want to give you the benefit of the doubt that we can work these things out. But when we get to that direct action, I am going to give you pressure. I'm going to put moral pressure on you, tension, to make you understand I'm committed to this. Direct action goes directly with personal commitment. If you're not committed, don't get into that direct action. If you're not committed to see it all the way through, because you don't know, everybody who was involved in a lot of the 50s and late 50s and the 60s, and sort of the 70s, civil rights, who felt that nonviolence was the way, they were committed. The John Lewises, the people who were committed to it, because they understood. We don't see that today very often, ladies and gentlemen, to be quite honest with you. Because what we see is everybody shows up ready to confront. Very few have gathered that information, educated others in their community, outside of screaming and hollering, church meetings. And I didn't say long meetings, people sitting there for 3 or 4 weeks trying to figure it out. Who's part of this movement? Who's with us? Who's willing to see this through? Because when you don't do that, you get what is called an agent provocateur, who will show up to cause trouble and give the opponent every excuse they need for something not to work. When Regina was saying with George Floyd, people came together. They started to realize that's murder. Conservative, liberal, whatever you are, that is murder. When you look at Ahmaud Arbery and he's been jumping out of the truck and blowing him away, that is murder. And we have to be able to negotiate, to come together, to understand that. And that leads us into his last thing, which was reconciliation. Nonviolence seeks friendship, understanding with the opponent, with the very people you are against. You're not looking, and this is where we lose it, to defeat that opponent. That's not really your goal. What you're trying to do is change hearts and minds. And a lot of people don't quite understand that. See, in a war, it's not just about the physical confrontation, right? There is a strategic. It's called SOT. There's a strategic. There's an operational, right? There are other parts of the war that are being fought beyond the physicality. And if you're strategic, or as Bush would say, strategical, do you understand? In this fight, let's talk about what we actually can agree on. And then when we get to, because now I've befriended you. Now you know me as a person. That's flesh. Not an idea, not a talking point, not the Negro, not the nigger, not the black person, not the African American, my African American. You know me as a person. And so when I sit down and talk to you, I'm not here to confront you and fight you. We can sit here and say, hey man, let's talk. Let's see where we agree, so that I can get you to understand what my plight is. See, without reconciliation, without the idea, right, of trying to bring people together, we will fall into a war, black on white war. That is why we have white Americans on the conservative side saying, I don't want you to teach my kids Black history. That is why we don't teach people these principal steps of nonviolence, but we will teach them the I Have a Dream speech, parts of it. We won't talk about the fact of Dr. King, as Daniel was referring to earlier, the three evils of society. We won't talk about those things because we don't want anybody, right, to think or to say that Dr. King had a mind. We just want him to be that symbol, that face that's sitting out there in DC. So that's a Black American to remember, but to remember him about what? What did he do? If there are very few people could tell you what he did. If you ask majority of Americans, who was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the first thing they'll say is, he had a dream. And then when you say, what was that dream? He wanted his children to be judged by the content of their character and not their color. Okay? How did he get us as a culture? How did he get those bills passed and signed by Johnson? It wasn't no dream to do it. It took these actions. It took those actions. Y'all kind of quiet out there. You kind of quiet out there. And I understand sometimes I get out and I just start throwing stuff at you. I want your thoughts. I want your thoughts. Because see, if we do not accept these principles and take this man's life work, this philosophy, his beliefs to heart, then unfortunately, what is going to happen is we're going to constantly be in a confrontation with each other, trying to win against people who actually may not even see us as an enemy. You're going to find yourself, as you see with some of these protests, young people dressed, looking like the very thing that this cop has been trained to kill. And I said it exactly like that. Jumping in that cop's face and telling him, you ain't nothing. And I say that in a nice way. And as you get violent, and they get violent, the opponent that Dr. King talks about in those 6 principles takes advantage of you. He takes advantage of you. Because while you're sitting here fighting and hollering and screaming and saying things that have nothing to do what we're out there about, and then you start throwing things at the cops, well, you're inciting riot. Where other people out there with their signs, some folks have gone to go meet with the mayor. And the first thing that was always said, if you go read any book by Dr. King, whenever they would go, the SCLC would go, and the first thing they said, well, don't bring no trouble here. So what did Dr. King and them do? During the Montgomery bus boycott, they went down, they went to the bars, the saloons, the hangouts for the criminals, because there was criminals. And they told them, if you want to be a benefit to your people, this is what we're going to do. We're going to show up at our church clothes. You don't believe it, go look at the footage. Even if I'm wearing some overalls, I'm going to come in there with a church jacket on. We're going to have a certain look, because we don't want to give this man or this no excuse to harm our people. And if you are a person that respects your culture, if you cannot go along with that, then don't show up. If you're a known criminal, don't show up. Because we don't want to give him any excuse. Because when we get down to that negotiation and we realize we got to go to direct action, the excuse is going to happen that, well, we shot into the crowd because we knew that Larry, Leon, and John always got weapons on them. We don't teach this. John Lewis wrote 3 books, and he was smart enough, I love that man, and intelligent enough, he converted them into comic books to teach us movement, what movement meant. My sons were on here a couple of weeks ago talking about movement. When I think about the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I think about movement. Every one of those principal steps that I just shared with you, every one of them is about movement. He's moving, right? He's showing you how to make something happen. He's giving you the steps. So if I'm not here, see, that's an educator. I'm giving you to read the things to do so that you will never forget how we reached our goal. Oh, we didn't get all the way there. But see, when you lose sight on these steps, on these principles, when you stop trying to understand what he did and only look at the man, then what you're going to do is you're going to get to a point where you will lose sight of what he was committed to, what his wife was committed to, what his friends, what his cohorts, for the people who work with him, what they were all committed to doing. I would tell you this week, Daniel, since you asked what could you be doing, I would say to go on to the King Foundation. I would say go there, spend some time at the King Center and try to look at these steps. I would also encourage you to go get, Dr. King had many books. He wrote those books for a reason. If you want to honor him on his birthday, then learn from what he was trying to teach us. There are many books that he's written. You get on Amazon and look for them. And the King Center was great enough to actually put those books and give us a selected reading list of what you should read. And I think you'll be good. I wanted to get on here tonight and share this with you. Too often, what happens every year is that we get people who get on, and there's no problem with that. And we share the history of Dr. King. We talk about when he was born. We share some epitaphs of "I Have a Dream" speech, and we say we appreciate him. No problem. See you next week, brother. But I think it's so important to know that man's philosophy. Many years ago, I wrote a paper for the Navy. And I was inspired to write that paper because I thought to myself, the Navy, everybody now has these core values. And the Navy had the core value of honor, courage, and commitment. And I thought, okay, that's great for the Navy. But I was tinkering with the idea. There was a contest to write about Dr. King. I said, Dr. King had those qualities, that honor, courage, and commitment, what they really mean, right? And the idea of honor, right? The idea to commit ourselves to something that was honest, to show pride and commitment to our country, to ourselves, to our family. That's what honor means. When he talked about the drum major instinct, right? It allows us to lead from the front without having an ego, to understand that we can be wrong, and to learn, to information gather, to be willing to learn every day. Military folks tell you the honor is sacred. They tell you that it is something that you have to earn honor. Well, you earn honor by committing yourselves, personal commitment. So we talked about. And then courage. There'd be few people could say that Martin Luther King Jr. was not a courageous person. Because at any given time, he could have sat down and said, hey, I don't want to die. I got kids. This is not my fight. But we also forget one thing, and I'm going to say this to you, some of you all out there who are not religious. He was also a man of God. He was a minister. He was raised by a minister. And understanding the purpose that God gives you, and understanding what I need to do, when he talks about personal commitment in his principles, let's understand something. Dr. King, in 1962, a woman walked up and stabbed him, a black woman, in the chest within an inch of his heart. He could have gave up right then. He could have said, man, the very people I'm out here fighting for, this lady going to show up and stab me. But he kept going. I was at the Great Blacks and Wax Museum in Maryland with my wife many years ago, and they had an exhibit showing the letters, just some of the letters he would get in. People said they were going to kill his kids, kill his wife, kill him, and all these things that they were saying that they were going to do to him up until the day he died. And then people were still sending letters in when he was killed saying, good that he was killed, all these negative, hateful letters. But you got to have a personal commitment. You got to be committed. Not a Facebook, TikTok moment. Yeah, I'm here. Every week on Thursday, I get on to do Erudition. And I told myself, I got to be personally committed. So I'm sharing this with you tonight. I got to be committed to do this. Because if I'm not committed, then why would anybody want to watch, be here, or whatever? Young lady told me a couple of weeks ago, she said, well, a lot of your audience doesn't watch this. You don't have a large audience. And I said to myself, I said, it doesn't matter. I know how many people watch because I get the feedback. But I'm committed. I'm committed beyond what I see. And I daily, as he said, check and affirm that what I'm doing is right, that what I'm doing is needed. That's what you should take into this holiday. Take these principles, these steps. Take these philosophies. He left them here for you. He gave his life. He was committed. When I say honor, courage, commitment by the Navy, one of the things I remember writing in that is I said commitment. I am committed to the excellence and the fair treatment of everything. That was his philosophy. He held America to a promise, and he was committed to see that promise. Just as our ancestors who were slaving in them fields were committed to the idea that one day, this gonna all be over. And where are we gonna be? Commitment is so important, and it is often lost. I hope that you got something tonight from this episode as we go into the Martin Luther King Jr. Birthday celebration next week. This weekend, we will be doing a special episode. It will be about 3 hours of Erudition. We'll be on from 1:30 to 4:30 on Saturday Central Standard Time, Chicago time, if you want something to look towards. And we will be on there to talk more about the idea of Dr. King's last book. Dr. King wrote a book. I have that book, as a matter of fact. His last book, you may have seen me, I often show this on Erudition, called Where Do We Go From Here? KSR Community. And we're going to have numerous guests to come on. Preachers, pastors, educators, folks are going to be on here. And we're going to talk about where we are, and we're going to talk about where we think we should be going. Where do we go from here? And so, again, I'm doing this because I want us to take that first step. Information gathering. No better way to do it than to bring people together. Thank you, Jackie. I was worried about this episode because I didn't want to give you a candy Dr. King. As a man of God, he used the principles that Jesus told his disciples, where the word being taught to you, Jesus Christ educated them in the word. Jesus told them the way to cost. Then take up the cross and not go and make more disciples, teaching them what I have taught. Exactly. But this is the thing. So many of us, we say we want to carry that cross. I'm going to say this before I get off of here. If you have to go. Please watch the replay or watch it later. But I remember when I started Erudition, long before I ever did the interactive, or I was thinking about toying around with the idea. And I was talking to my father, and I told him I wanted to do something about Black history. He had no problem with me doing it, but he said, son, do you understand what you're committing yourself to? People gonna watch that. You'll be all over the world. They'll see you on YouTube. They'll use it against you. They'll fight you. Maybe they'll send you threats. You got to be willing to take what God gave you. That's what Gina said right here, right? You got to be willing to weigh the cost. Is it worth it? Is my soul worth it? Is my mind worth it? Is my spirit? Is it worth me ignoring what God has blessed me to understand and not share with anybody else? It's not, in my belief. We have to teach. We have to show ourselves studied and approved to teach. I'm glad that many of you got something from this. Please join us. I was trying to bring up this. Join us. Get on the Erudition Facebook site. And you will see we will be on this Saturday at 1:30. I'll be on there, and I want you all to tune in if you can. We'll be on for a couple of hours, right? And I want you to be able to actually, and even for you, Glory, man, I'm glad that you came up on here. Please come on and ask questions. Let's go into this. Let's study. Let's learn. All right. I'm a minute and 44 seconds over my time, but I thank all of you all who came on. It's always amazing to me when people show up on here every week, and I thank you. Have a blessed and beautiful rest of your week, and hopefully we will see you on Saturday for the Erudition Dr. King special that we'll be doing. And I'm going to put this on here just so that I know that it's on here, because I want people to, if they watch this and they get a chance to actually see this. So give me one moment. I'm sorry. To share this so that you can see. This thing wanted to fight. It's been fighting with me all day. There it is. All right. So that's going to be our for Erudition. This is what we're going to be doing. We will be, please forget the time. I think this is the older fly, but we'll be on from 1:30 to 4:30. And please join us and ask your questions. Join us in chat. Share. Get on the Erudition Facebook page. Share the link with your friends so more and more people can be on there to watch these great guests we're going to have. I believe so, Virginia. I'll check it out and I'll send it to you. Let you know you will be one of the people on here. I really appreciate you coming on to spend time with us. Oh, mommy, thanks. Appreciate it. It's my mom. All right, everybody. I'm out of here. Thank you again. Have a blessed week, rest of your week, and we will see you later. Thank you.